Thanks for joining me on the news. We begin with Zelensky to meet Erdogan as Kyiv pushes NATO goals. Guterres condemns Israeli attack on Jenin. Schulz supports Fukushima water plant. Russia fighter jets harass US drones again, and US to send more ammunition to Ukraine. Stay with me for these and more stories. On Friday, President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to hold talks with Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the newest leg of a tour to push Ukraine's bid to join NATO and secure more weapons from allies. The meetings in Istanbul come on the eve of the 500th day since Russia's invasion, with Zelensky admitting a widely anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive was progressing slowly. But nevertheless, we are advancing, not retreating like Russians, Zelensky said, according to a report. We now have the initiative. The talks with Erdogan, an important broker in the conflict, are due to aim on an expiry deal to ship Ukrainian grain across the Black Sea, as well as next week's NATO summit. Analysts anticipate Zelensky to push Erdogan to give a green light for the Sweden's NATO membership ahead of the July 11th and 12th meeting in Lithuanian capital Vilnius. Turkey is blocking Sweden's candidacy because of a long-standing dispute about Stockholm's perceived lax attitude towards alleged Kurdish militants living in the Nordic country. Zelensky is seeking NATO accession for his own country, which has been battling a Russian invasion since February 2022, and has said he wants the summit to lead to an invitation to join the bloc. Both Zelensky and Erdogan want to extend a United Nations and Turkey brokered deal with Russia, under which Ukraine has been allowed to ship grain to global markets during the war. The deal will expire on July 17th unless Russia agrees to its renewal. Erdogan has tried to leverage good working relations with both Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin to mediate an end to the war. Turkey staged 2 early rounds of peace negotiations and is pushing for more talks. On Thursday, before visiting Prague, Zelensky traveled to Sofia to discuss weapons deliveries with Bulgaria, the major supporter and ammunition producer. Now, Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, has condemned the Israeli military excessive use of force in its biggest operation in 2 decades against the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Over 100 civilians were injured, thousands were forced to flee their homes, schools and hospitals were damaged, and water and electricity networks were disrupted during the Israeli military operation, Guterres said on Thursday. He also said Israeli forces had prevented the injured from receiving medical care and stopped humanitarian workers from reaching those in the need. The UN chief reminded Israel that as the occupying power, it has a responsibility to ensure that the civilian population is protected against all acts of violence. Israel's airstrikes and ground operations in a crowded refugee camp were the worst violence in the West occupied bank in many years, with a significant impact on civilians, Guterres said. I once again call on Israel to abide by its obligations under international law, he said. The use of airstrikes is inconsistent with the conduct of law enforcement operations, he added. I understand Israel's legitimate concerns with its security, but escalation is never the answer. No less than 12 Palestinians were killed in the 2-day raid on the refugee camp, which involved approximately 1,000 Israeli soldiers and was accompanied by air attacks and deliberate damage to civilian infrastructure such as roads, water and electricity supplies. Israeli forces also attacked hospitals in Jenin, severely damaging their operational capacity, according to Physicians for Human Rights Israel, PHRI. 5 civilians were injured as a result, including 3 in serious condition, the organization said. When hospitals are attacked and their protected status is ignored, the resulting damage is detrimental, it added. The Secretary General's condemnation followed a statement by 3 United Nations independent human rights experts on Wednesday, who said that the Israeli air attacks and ground actions in Jenin amount to egregious violations of international law and standards on the use of force and may constitute a war crime. Now, South Korea has said it trusts Japan's plan to release treated water from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear plants will meet international standards days after United Nations Atomic Agency review of the controversial proposal found it was safe. Shaw said its own assessments based on an inspection of the plant in late May, its own data, a United Nations nuclear watchdog IAEA's review suggested the release of more than 1.3 million tons of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean will be safe if it were carried out as detailed in the proposal. Bang Moon-kyu, Minister of the Office for Government Policy Coordination, said according to reports on Friday, we have confirmed the concentration of radioactive material meets standards for ocean discharge, and therefore the plant meets international standards, including those of the IAEA. The proposal to release the water, most of it used to cool the reactors before being treated and stored in huge tanks around the site, has caused concern not only among Japan's neighbors, but also among many Pacific Island nations, which are still dealing with the legacy of nuclear weapons testing. Much of the concern centers around the potential risks from the radioactive isotope tritium, which is difficult to remove from water. In its 2-year safety review, the IAEA said Japan will dilute the water before discharge to bring the level below regulatory standards, adding that its experts will be stationed at Fukushima for any release, which is expected to take decades. The plan was consistent with relevant international safety standards, and the controlled gradual discharges of the treated water to the sea will have a negligible radiological impact on people and the environment, according to Director General Rafael Grossi on Tuesday. Moving ahead, again, Russian fighter jets have flown dangerously close to many US MQ9 Reaper drones operating over Syria, the second such incident of harassment in 24 hours, setting off flares and forcing Washington's unmanned aerial vehicles to take evasive maneuvers, the United States Air Force said. The protest from the US Air Force's came as the French military said that 2 of its fighter jets on patrol over the Iraq-Syria border area were forced to maneuver to control the risk of accident involving a Russian Sukhoi Su-35 warplane. On Thursday, the Russian aircraft had engaged in non-professional interaction with 2 of France's Rafale planes deployed to the region as part of Operation Kamal, which seeks to contain the ISIS group in Iraq and Syria, the French military said. Wednesday and Thursday, 2 separate incidents involving Russian warplanes and US Reaper drones were captured on video, the US said. The events represent a new level of unprofessional and unsafe action by Russian air forces operating in Syria, the US military added. We urge Russian forces in Syria to cease this reckless behavior and adhere to the standards of behavior expected of a professional air force so we can resume our focus on the enduring defeat of ISIS, Lieutenant General Alexis Greenkiewicz, head of US Air Force's Central Command, said in a statement. In the first incident, which took place about 10:40 a.m. local time on Wednesday in northwest Syria, Russian Sukhoi Su-35 fighters closed in on a Reaper drone, and one of the Russian pilots moved their aircraft in front of the US aerial vehicles and engaged the Su-35's afterburner, which greatly increases its speed and air pressure. In the second incident, which took place over northwest Syria at approximately 9:30 a.m. on Thursday local time, Russian aircraft dropped flares in front of the drones and flew dangerously close, endangering the safety of all aircraft involved, Greenkiewicz said. The Reaper drones involved in the incidents were not armed with weapons and are commonly used for reconnaissance missions. According to reports, the United States has decided to send cluster munitions to Ukraine despite fears about the deployment of weapons banned by over 100 countries. A weapons package including cluster munitions fired from a 155mm howitzer cannon is anticipated to be announced as soon as Friday, 3 U.S. officials said, on condition of anonymity, reports said. According to more reports citing people familiar with the talks who requested anonymity, reported that numerous of U.S. President Joe Biden's major aides, including Secretary of State Antony Blinken, had recommended the U.S. send the weapons at a meeting of top national security officials last week, despite what they described as their own deep reservations. Cluster bombs released large numbers of smaller bomblets across a wide area, posing a major threat to civilians both during the war and long afterwards because some of the bomblets will fail to explode. Over 120 countries have signed the 2008 United Nations Convention on Cluster Munitions to ban their use, including some of Ukraine and the US key allies such as France and the United Kingdom. Ukraine, Russia, and the US have not signed that treaty, although in 2009, law bans the US from exporting cluster munitions with bomblet failure rates above 1%, which covers virtually the whole US military stockpile. However, Biden can override such prohibitions in cases seemed in the interest of US national security. Human Rights Watch HRW earlier criticized Ukraine and Russia for their use of cluster weapons in the conflict. The rights group said Russia had extensively used cluster munitions, causing many civilian deaths and serious injuries, while Ukrainian cluster munition rocket attacks on the then Russian-occupied city of Izium in 2022 had killed at least 8 civilians and wounded 15 more. Ukraine told HRW it had not used cluster munitions in or around the city at the time. Mary Wareham, the group's acting arms director, said in a statement that cluster munitions used by Russia and Ukraine are killing civilians now and will continue to do so for many years. Both sides should immediately stop using them and not try to get more of these indiscriminate weapons. Despite the humanitarian fears, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and other senior Ukrainian officials have been calling for new stocks of cluster weapons, saying they are the best way to break through the Russian trenches that are slowing Kyiv's counter-offensive. Ukraine is also running low on conventional artillery shells. Here are more stories. Stoltenberg, NATO closely watching Wagner mercenaries. The Western Military Alliance's Secretary General has said NATO is closely following the movement of Russia's Wagner mercenary force as well as their boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, following disclosures that neither the private army's fighters nor their leader had taken up exile in Belarus. On Thursday, NATO's Jens Stoltenberg made his comments amidst reports that Prigozhin was back in Russia and had not taken up the offer of exile in Belarus, which was agreed after Wagner forces started and ended a 24-hour mutiny against the Russian military leadership on June 24th. Stoltenberg said that NATO had tracked the Wagner leader's recent travels, which he described as moving a bit around, while commenting on reports that Prigozhin had returned to the Russian city of St. Petersburg. Prigozhin's return to Russia was exposed by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko on Thursday. Lukashenko, who intervened in the exile deal that ended the Wagner mutiny last month, said that after a brief period in Belarus, the Wagner chief had returned to Russia. Lukashenko also said that the Wagner's forces were in their camps, but he did not specify the location of the camps. He did say that Wagner troops were offered the use of Belarusian military camps, but that the private armed group had not made a final decision. Wagner maintains camps in Russia and Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. According to reports, Lukashenko said that he plans to meet Russian President Vladimir Putin soon to deliberate the Wagner situation, among other topics, and that he did not think there will be any problems with Wagner mercenaries continuing to work in the interests of Russia despite their recent rebellion. In Africa, South Africa gas leak death toll reaches 17. A toxic gas leak that authorities blame on an illegal gold processing operation in South Africa death toll rose to 17, including 3 children, as police removed canisters from a community of closely packed shacks and sifted through proof on Thursday. On Wednesday night, the leak of what authorities said was a toxic nitrate gas happened in the informal Adjalo settlement in Boksburg, a city on the eastern outskirts of Johannesburg. According to Panyiza Lesufi, the premier of Gauteng province, who gave an update on Thursday, the 3 children who died were ages 1, 6 and 15, police said. At least 10 people were hospitalized, including a 2-month-old baby, 2 4-year-olds and a 9-year-old. A statement from South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's office said it was a devastating and tragic loss of innocent lives. Search teams searched the area deep into the night looking for other possible casualties. Authorities didn't say if the people engaged in the illegal gold processing thought to have caused the gas leak were among the dead, but police opened a criminal case. Investigators made their way through narrow alleys between shacks and other makeshift homes that were dark due to a lack of street lights, a common situation in the deeply impoverished informal settlements found in and around South Africa's cities. Let's take a short break, and when we come back, I'll bring you more stories, particularly from Nigeria. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Tinubu suspends taxes, signs 4 executive orders. On Thursday, the organized private sector welcomed the tax suspensions announced by President Bola Tinubu, noting that they indicated the federal government was sensitive to the challenges facing commercial activities and the citizens. However, the private sector operators pointed out that the tax holds were insufficient to curtail increasing inflation or the microeconomic headwinds threatening the survival of several local businesses. Hence, they asked the president to implement additional tax waivers and incentives in order to lessen the high cost of doing business, tackle increasing inflation, and address the several economic challenges affecting businesses. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture made this known while responding to the tax suspensions by the federal government. Earlier on Thursday in Abuja, Tinubu had signed 4 executive orders suspending the 5% excise due tax on telecommunication services and the excise duties increase on locally manufactured. Dele Alike, Special Advisor to the President on Special Duties, Communications and Strategy, announced the development while briefing State House correspondents at the Presidential Villa in Abuja. Others on the team were Special Advisor to the President on Revenue, Mr. Zakios Adedeji, a member of the Presidential Advisory Council on Finance and other related matters, Ms. Doris Anyete, and Adenike Laye from the Office of the Chief of Staff to the President. The step is to make sure that the Act aligns with the 90-day notice period needed by the National Tax Policy 2017, according to the team. Tinubu also signed the Customs Excise Tariff Variation Amendment Order 2023, shifting the commencement date of the tax changes from March 27, 2023 to August 1, 2023, in line with the National Tax Policy. He also ordered the suspension of the newly introduced green tax through the excise tax of single-use plastics, including plastic containers and bottles. Likewise, he suspended the import tax adjustment levy on certain vehicles. Alake explained that these orders were intended to curb the negative effects of the tax adjustments on businesses and households across the affected sectors. However, he reiterated the president's promise to addressing complaints about numerous taxation and other connected challenges facing business, noting that Tinubu administration will continue to give necessary stimulus through welcoming policies to permit businesses to flourish nationwide. The president promised Nigerians that there will not be further tax increases without robust and broad consultations within a coherent fiscal policy framework. According to him, the president plans to listen to the worries of the Nigerian people and lessen the negative effects of the tax adjustments rather than exacerbate the challenges facing citizens. Some of the problems identified with the tax changes include the 2017 National Tax Policy approved by President Muhammadu Buhari's administration, prescribing a minimum of 90 days notice from the government to taxpayers before any tax changes can take effect. Still on the news, demonstrators storm EU office over polls report. Members of the Coalition of Civil Society Organizations and Political Parties for Good Governance, CCSOPPGG, have beleaguered the European Union office in demonstration against its report on the 2023 presidential election. The coalition, which mobilized some other Nigerians in their hundreds, cautioned the European Union against prompting another war in Nigeria through what it termed as the international body's bias report on the victory of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. The EU criticized the 2023 general election, premising its report on alleged violence, killings and vote buying in its report, which was tendered before the Presidential Petitions Court in Abuja. The protesters, who carried placards with different inscriptions, staged a peaceful march through the central area to the head office of the European Union in Abuja. Addressing officials of the EU who were on ground to receive the protesters, leader of the coalition, Dr. Lilian Ene Ogbole, accused the EU of intentionally trying to damage the Nigerian government and its leaders, noting that every poll comes with peculiar problems and Nigeria is not an exception. Ogbole wondered how possible less than 50 people from the European Union will come to Nigeria and observe an election of over 17,600 polling units and then arrive at a conclusion with just 1,000 polling units of election centers. In its report, The coalition noted that if it is the same election that the EU report is referring to, then something is fishy somewhere, even as it queried why the EU had to take its report to the Election Petitions Tribunal. The coalition told the EU officials that Nigerians were not forced to vote Tinubu, but were convinced with his track record and his capacity. And finally, on the news, Diphtheria Nigeria records 798 cases, 80 deaths. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention has 798 diphtheria cases in 8 states across 33 local government areas in the country. The death toll has also gotten to 80, with a case fatality ratio of 10% as of June 30th, 2023. On Thursday, the NCDC revealed this in a statement signed by its Director General, Dr. Ifedayo Edetifa, following the first reported confirmed case of diphtheria in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. The Federal Capital Territory Administration had on Monday announced that the disease claimed the life of a 4-year-old child in Dede district of the Federal Capital Territory. However, the NCDC said that the FCT Health and Human Services Secretariat has activated the Diphtheria Incident Management System to coordinate outbreak response activities. It said as of July 3, 2023, only 1 confirmed case has been detected in the FCT, with 7 suspected cases testing negative, while others are awaiting laboratory results. The Public Health Institute noted that since December 2022, diphtheria cases have been in Kano, Lagos, Yobe, Katsina, Cross River, Kaduna, Osun State, and the Federal Capital Territory. It said Kano State leads with 782 cases. Diphtheria, caused by a toxin produced by the bacteria Corynebacterium diphtheriae, is a vaccine-preventable disease covered by one of the vaccines provided routinely through Nigeria's childhood immunization schedule. In spite of the accessibility of a safe and cost-effective vaccine in the country, the majority, 82% of the 798 confirmed diphtheria cases in the ongoing outbreak, were unvaccinated, the NCDC said. According to them, it activated a multi-sectoral national diphtheria technical working group as a mechanism for coordinating surveillance and response activities across the country in December 2022. To refresh our memories, Zelensky to meet Erdogan as Kyiv pushes NATO goals. Guterres condemns Israeli attack on Jenin. Scholz supports Fukushima water plan. Russia fighter jets harass US drones again, and US to send more munitions to Ukraine. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.